The breach opened above Hive Gathis like a wound in reality itself, spilling corruption that turned the sky into a canvas of impossible colors, while demons poured through the tier in space-time like infections spreading through healthy tissue. I had been a guardsman for 8 years, seen orc invasions and Tau pulse fire, but nothing in my experience had prepared me for enemies that existed partially outside the laws of physics while wielding weapons that could kill souls as easily as bodies. The 40-honest Cadian had been holding the outer defense perimeter when the warp storm broke through atmospheric barriers that should have protected us from the realm of pure chaos, but our earthworks and established positions proved meaningless against foes who could materialize behind our lines while ignoring conventional concepts of distance and temporal sequence. The first wave of demons struck our positions with force that shattered companies in minutes, while our weapons seemed ineffective against entities that reformed from psychic energy faster than we could destroy them. Commissar Valdris maintained discipline through summary execution of anyone who showed signs of retreating, while his bolt pistol spoke with authority that transcended military rank or individual survival instincts. His presence kept the line intact during the initial assault, while his voice carried across the battlefield with commands that reminded us of our duty to the Emperor and the consequences of failure in the face of enemies that threatened human civilization itself. "Hold fast, you dogs," he roared while his chainsword carved through a daemon that resembled a fusion of industrial machinery and diseased flesh. "The Emperor's light burns in your hearts while his enemies flee before disciplined fire and righteous steel. Show them what Cadian training has made of you." The daemons advanced through our positions with movements that defied tactical analysis while their forms shifted between different configurations that served specialized combat functions. Some resembled mechanical constructs, armed with weapons that fired projectiles composed of crystallized screaming, while others took shapes that hurt the mind to perceive directly, while radiating emanations that caused madness in anyone who looked upon them without proper spiritual protection. Lieutenant Korvac's platoon held the eastern approach until daemon engines broke through their defensive positions with weapons that consumed flesh and steel with equal efficiency, while leaving behind zones of twisted reality where physics operated according to principles that violated human understanding. His final transmission consisted of tactical updates that dissolved into incoherent babbling before the Vox channel filled with sounds that resembled mechanical laughter mixed with human screams. The retreat began when Captain Morven acknowledged that our defensive positions could not be maintained against enemies whose capabilities exceeded conventional military parameters, while ordering a fighting withdrawal toward prepared, fallback positions that might provide temporary sanctuary until reinforcements arrived. His decision probably saved lives, but military doctrine demanded that ground be held regardless of cost, while retreat represented failure that reflected poorly on regimental honor and imperial determination. Commissar Valdris executed Captain Morven for cowardice, while announcing that anyone who abandoned their assigned positions would face identical judgment regardless of circumstances or tactical situation. His actions restored immediate discipline while creating psychological pressure that kept soldiers at their posts despite overwhelming evidence that continued resistance would result in complete annihilation of our forces. The slaughter that followed exceeded anything recorded in regimental histories, while daemons tore through defensive lines that had been designed to stop conventional enemies rather than entities that operated beyond normal physical limitations. Our weapons proved marginally effective against foes that could absorb enormous damage while regenerating through processes that drew energy from the warp itself, making sustained combat a losing proposition that favored enemies with unlimited reserves. Private Hendricks from 2nd Squad died when a daemon weapon fired projectiles that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions while tearing holes in reality that consumed everything within their area of effect. His body simply ceased to exist while his screams continued echoing through frequencies that human ears couldn't detect but which somehow reached consciousness through channels that bypassed normal sensory perception. The medical station where I had been receiving treatment for shrapnel wounds became a charnel house as demons targeted non-combatants with particular enthusiasm while demonstrating tactical intelligence that suggested coordination by FA demons, entities possessing military knowledge equivalent to trained human commanders. Medicae personnel died at their aid stations, while wounded soldiers found themselves defenseless against enemies who showed no mercy to individuals unable to fight effectively. The sky continued bleeding impossible colors, while the breach expanded to accommodate larger demon entities whose emergence heralded escalation that would overwhelm any conventional defense through sheer scale and supernatural capability. The fabric of reality itself was becoming unstable, while areas affected by demonic presence began exhibiting properties that challenged fundamental assumptions about physical laws and material consistency. Then, salvation arrived in the form of drop pods that fell from orbit like silver meteors, while carrying warriors whose very presence seemed to push back the corruption that had been spreading through our positions like cancer through healthy tissue. The Grey Knights emerged from their transports with weapons that blazed with psychic fire, while their power armor gleamed with sanctified metal that reflected the Emperor's light in ways that forced daemons to retreat from areas they had previously dominated. Brother Captain Aurelius led the assault with force that transcended normal Space Marine capabilities, while his nemesis force weapon carved through demonic flesh like divine lightning, striking blasphemous targets. His presence on the battlefield created a zone of stability, where reality reasserted itself while pushing back the warp energies that had been corrupting local spacetime through proximity to entities that existed primarily in the realm of pure chaos. The Grey Knights fought with precision that demonstrated specialized training in anti-demon warfare, while their tactics incorporated psychic disciplines that allowed them to engage enemies on multiple dimensional levels simultaneously. Their stormbolters fired blessed ammunition that could harm creatures existing partially outside normal reality, while their close combat weapons channeled psychic energy that burned daemon essence more effectively than conventional weapons could damage their physical manifestations. The battle turned decisively as the Grey Knights advanced through daemon positions that had seemed impregnable, while their coordinated assault eliminated key targets that were directing the invasion through command hierarchies that operated according to warp-based communication protocols. Each daemon leader that fell weakened the overall cohesion of enemy forces while disrupting their ability to maintain stable manifestation in real space. Brother Thaddeus wielded a psy-cannon that fired projectiles composed of sanctified energy, while his shots created explosions that banished multiple daemons simultaneously through psychic resonance effects that spread corruption-cleansing force throughout areas of concentrated enemy activity. His weapons spoke with authority that transcended conventional military firepower while demonstrating capabilities that exceeded anything available to normal Imperial forces. The daemon prince that commanded the invasion materialized near our position with form that challenged human perception, while radiating malevolence that caused physical pain in anyone who looked directly upon its manifestation. The creature possessed capabilities that exceeded those of lesser demons, while wielding weapons that could reshape local reality according to its will rather than physical laws that governed normal material interactions. Brother Captain Aurelius engaged the daemon prince in single combat that transcended normal categories of warfare, while their battle created psychic shockwaves that affected reality in expanding circles around their point of daemon contact. The captain's force weapon blazed with light that hurt to perceive directly, while his opponent's claws carved wounds in spacetime that bled impossible substances onto ground that had previously been solid earth. The daemon prince died with screams that shattered windows throughout the hive, while its destruction triggered cascade effects that banished lesser daemons back to the warp through sympathetic resonance that severed their connection to real space manifestation. The victory was complete and decisive, while demonstrating capabilities that justified the Grey Knight's reputation as humanity's ultimate weapon against demonic invasion. We cheered their triumph, while offering prayers of gratitude to warriors who had saved us from enemies that conventional forces could never have defeated through normal military action. The Grey Knights stood among the corpses of entities that had threatened to consume our souls, while their presence provided assurance that the Emperor's protection extended to those who served faithfully despite overwhelming odds against survival. But the celebration ended abruptly when Brother Captain Aurelius turned toward the surviving Imperial Guard personnel with expression that suggested our rescue had been incidental to his primary mission rather than its ultimate objective. His helmet's optical arrays scanned our group, while servo skulls recorded biometric data that would identify every individual who had witnessed the Grey Knights in action against their demonic enemies. "Form ranks for inspection," he commanded, while his brothers took positions that suggested security procedures rather than military courtesy. All personnel who observed combat operations will submit to screening protocols designed to ensure spiritual purity and operational security regarding classified Imperial assets. The Medici who had treated my wounds approached the Grey Knights with gratitude that reflected his relief at surviving encounters that should have claimed all our lives, while his medical training made him eager to assist warriors whose capabilities had preserved Imperial forces from complete annihilation. His professional enthusiasm made him oblivious to subtle signs that suggested our situation had fundamentally changed despite the elimination of demonic threats. Brother Sergeant Mordrak's chainsword activated with sound that cut through ambient noise, while blessed teeth began their mechanical rotation in preparation for actions that would serve purposes beyond ceremonial display. The weapon's machine spirits sang with harmonics that spoke of violence applied in service to objectives that transcended individual survival or conventional military priorities. "No witness remains," the sergeant stated, while his blade found the Medicae's throat with precision that demonstrated extensive practice in eliminating targets that posed no immediate threat to trained Space Marines. "Knowledge of our existence threatens operational security that serves the Emperor's will through methods that require absolute secrecy." The slaughter that followed exceeded the daemon assault in its systematic efficiency, while Grey Knights eliminated every survivor who had observed their combat capabilities or learned details about their specialized role in combating warp-based threats to Imperial security. They showed no emotion during the killings, while treating our deaths as necessary completion of their primary mission rather than betrayal of individuals who had fought alongside Imperial forces. My survival came through chance rather than design when Brother Aurelius's force weapon stopped centimeters from my heart, while psychic emanations from the blade created sensory overload that rendered me unconscious before the killing blow could be completed. The captain's hesitation suggested detection of something that made immediate execution inadvisable, while requiring alternative approaches that would serve operational objectives through different methods. Consciousness returned to restraints that prevented movement, while my captors discussed my fate in terms that treated individual survival as variable in calculations that prioritized security over mercy or conventional concepts of justice. For those who had served Imperial interests faithfully during crisis that had threatened entire populations, the conversation revealed truths about Grey Knights' operations that challenged assumptions about their role in protecting human civilization. The chains that bound my wrists were crafted from blessed adamantium, while inscribed with ward symbols that prevented psychic influence or demonic possession from affecting prisoners who might have been marked by exposure to warp entities during combat operations. The metal bit into flesh that had swollen around the restraints, while chemical suppressants in my bloodstream made coherent thought difficult but not impossible, creating mental fog that obscured details while preserving enough awareness to understand the scope of my predicament. The transport that carried us beneath Hive Gathis moved through tunnels that had been carved from living rock, while reinforced with materials that could withstand orbital bombardment or psyker manifestation events. The smooth walls showed no tool marks, while their construction suggested techniques that exceeded standard Imperial engineering capabilities, possibly incorporating technologies that predated the current Imperium or originated from sources that remained carefully classified within Inquisition archives. 23 other survivors shared my captivity, while their wounds from the daemon assault remained untreated except for basic field dressing that prevented death through blood loss, without restoring combat effectiveness or physical comfort. The Grey Knights had preserved only those individuals whose survival served purposes related to their operational requirements, while the majority of witnesses had been eliminated through summary execution that left no evidence of their existence or testimony. Corporal Vex from 3rd Company had sustained severe burns during the demonic assault, while his augmetic left eye sparked intermittently from electromagnetic damage that disrupted its connection to his optic nerve. His injuries would have qualified him for medical evacuation under normal circumstances, but the Grey Knights showed no interest in providing treatment that might preserve life beyond the minimum required for interrogation and classification procedures. The detention facility that became our destination resembled a fortress built within the planet's crust, while its architecture incorporated defensive features that could contain threats ranging from conventional military assault, psychic manifestation events that might compromise structural integrity, Guard towers mounted weapon systems that fired ammunition blessed against demonic incursion, while automated sensors monitored for warp energy fluctuations that might indicate attempted possession or reality distortion. Brother Librarian Hyperion supervised our processing through procedures that evaluated each prisoner's exposure to warp energies while determining the appropriate method of ensuring permanent silence about classified operations that threatened Imperium security through unauthorized disclosure. His psychic abilities allowed direct examination of memories and thought patterns, while bypassing normal interrogation techniques that might prove inadequate for detecting subtle corruption or resistance to standard conditioning methods. The screening chamber contained equipment that combined Imperial technology with devices whose origin and function remained obscure to individuals lacking specialized knowledge about psychic manipulation and memory extraction procedures. Neural interface cables connected to monitoring systems that could record and analyze thought patterns, while chemical injectors delivered compounds that enhanced psychic sensitivity while weakening mental defenses against telepathic intrusion. My turn for evaluation came after hours of waiting, while listening to sounds that emerged from the screening chamber, whenever other prisoners underwent the process that would determine their ultimate fate within the Grey Knight's protocol for managing witnesses to classified operations. The sounds included mechanical humming mixed with human vocalization that suggested procedures involving both technological intervention and psychic manipulation of neural structures. Brother Librarian Hyperion's presence created pressure that affected reality around him, while his psychic abilities generated electromagnetic fields that interfered with normal brain function in unshielded individuals. The neural interface connected to his power armor allowed direct communication with monitoring equipment, while his enhanced perception could detect subtle signs of demonic taint or corruption that might remain hidden from conventional examination methods. The psychic probe that penetrated my consciousness felt like ice-cold needles inserted directly into brain tissue, while foreign awareness examined memories that I had never intended to share with any external entity. The intrusion bypassed normal psychological defenses while accessing information stored in neural patterns that included not only conscious recollection, but also subconscious impressions and emotional responses that had been recorded during traumatic experiences. The examination revealed details about my military service that exceeded what should have been accessible through memory alone, including tactical assessments and psychological evaluations that had been classified within regimental records. The probe also detected traces of warp exposure that had occurred during the daemon assault while measuring levels of corruption that might require specific countermeasures to prevent future manifestation of hostile influences. This subject shows minimal demonic taint despite direct exposure to greater daemon manifestation, Hyperion announced, while Servo Skulls recorded his assessment for inclusion in official documentation that would determine my classification within protocols designed to manage security risks. Psychological conditioning appears intact while resistance to warp influence falls within acceptable parameters for continued existence. The classification that followed assigned each prisoner to categories that determined their ultimate fate within systems, designed to eliminate security risks while maximizing utility from individuals whose termination might represent waste of potentially valuable resources. The categories ranged from immediate execution through various forms of memory modification to assignment to specialized roles that required complete secrecy about their previous experiences. Servitor conversion represented the most common outcome for prisoners whose mental capacity was deemed adequate for basic functions, while their knowledge of classified operations made normal reintegration into Imperial society impossible due to security considerations. The procedure involved selective lobotomy that preserved motor functions and technical skills, while eliminating personality traits and memories that might compromise operational secrecy. The servitor processing facility occupied chambers that had been designed for industrial-scale modification of human subjects, while incorporating medical equipment that could perform neural surgery with precision that exceeded capabilities available at most Imperial medical installations. The procedures involved both surgical intervention and chemical treatment that altered brain chemistry, while installing control implants that ensured absolute obedience to programmed commands. Private Hendricks from my squad was selected for servitor conversion due to his technical expertise in equipment maintenance, while his exposure to classified information made him unsuitable for return to normal military service. The procedure began with chemical sedation that prevented resistance, while neural mapping identified brain structures that would be modified or eliminated according to specifications that maximized utility while ensuring complete compliance. The surgical process involved opening the skull while the subject remained conscious to ensure proper neural response during modification procedures that required real-time monitoring of brain function. Servo arms, guided by apothecary expertise, removed specific brain structures while installing cybernetic components that would regulate behavior and eliminate capacity for independent thought that might compromise operational security. Hendricks emerged from the procedure as a functional servitor whose technical skills remained intact, while his personality and memory had been eliminated through selective destruction of neural tissue. His eyes showed no recognition of former comrades, while his behavior demonstrated mechanical compliance with programmed instructions that governed his existence according to protocols that treated him as equipment rather than human being. Inquisition, indoctrination, represented an alternative outcome for prisoners whose psychological profiles suggested potential utility for specialized operations, while their knowledge of Grey Knight's activities required careful management through conditioning techniques that modified memory and personality without complete elimination of individual consciousness. The process involved extended exposure to psychic manipulation, combined with chemical treatment that altered neural pathways. Corporal Vex was selected for indoctrination due to his leadership capabilities and combat experience that might prove valuable for Inquisition operations, requiring individuals with military training and proven loyalty to Imperial cause. The procedure began with isolation in chambers, designed to break psychological resistance, while chemical agents weakened mental defenses against telepathic manipulation that would reshape his consciousness according to Inquisition requirements. The indoctrination process involved systematic replacement of memories with artificial constructs that supported desired behavioral patterns while eliminating knowledge that posed security risks. The procedure required precise psychic manipulation that preserved functional capabilities, while installing loyalty programming that ensured absolute obedience to Inquisition authority, regardless of personal cost or moral consideration. Vex's transformation occurred gradually over weeks of treatment that combined pharmaceutical intervention with psychic conditioning designed to alter fundamental aspects of personality and motivation. His progress was monitored through regular evaluation that measured compliance with programmed responses, while identifying areas requiring additional modification to achieve desired behavioral outcomes. The screams that emerged from indoctrination chambers reflected psychological trauma that accompanied forced personality reconstruction, while subjects retained enough awareness to understand what was being done to them despite their inability to resist the process. The sounds included prayer recitation that continued until vocal cords were damaged through repetition, while pleas for death demonstrated understanding that the procedure represented destruction of individual identity. Penitential regiment assignment offered apparent mercy through continued military service while concealing the reality that such units were designed to eliminate security risks through deployment in operations where survival was statistically impossible. The regiments received missions that served legitimate military objectives while ensuring that classified knowledge would be eliminated through combat casualties rather than direct execution. Sergeant Korvac from 2nd Platoon was assigned to a penitential regiment due to his combat effectiveness and leadership qualities that made him potentially valuable for military operations despite his exposure to classified with plaque information. The assignment appeared to offer continued service to the Emperor while actually representing delayed execution through deployment in situations where survival was not expected or desired by commanding authorities. The penitential regiments operated under command structures that ensured mission completion, regardless of casualty rates, while their deployment patterns guaranteed that surviving members would face increasingly dangerous assignments until attrition eliminated all personnel who possessed classified knowledge. The system provided plausible cover for eliminating security risks while extracting military value from condemned individuals. Brother Captain Aurelius supervised the classification process while his presence reminded all subjects that their survival depended upon complete cooperation with procedures designed to serve imperial security interests, rather than individual welfare or conventional concepts of justice. His authority transcended normal military hierarchy, while his decisions carried weight that reflected direct mandate from the highest levels of imperial command structure. My own classification remained undetermined, while additional evaluation procedures assessed factors that might influence the optimal method of managing security risks that my continued existence represented. The delay suggested complications in my case that required consultation with authorities whose clearance levels exceeded those of personnel conducting initial processing of witness groups. The waiting period allowed observation of other prisoners as they underwent various processing procedures, while providing insights into the scope and sophistication of systems designed to manage security risks through methods that ranged from termination through modification to specialized deployment that served multiple objectives simultaneously. The efficiency of the operation demonstrated extensive experience with similar situations while revealing the systematic nature of witness elimination protocols. The facility itself represented a significant investment in infrastructure, designed specifically for managing complications that arose from Grey Knight's operations, while providing capabilities that could handle large numbers of witnesses through standardized procedures that maximize security while minimizing resource expenditure. The scale of the installation suggested that witness elimination was routine rather than exceptional aspect of Grey Knight's activities. The psychological impact of witnessing these procedures created understanding that my survival was temporary, while the only question remaining was which method would be employed to ensure my permanent silence about classified operations. The various options represented different forms of death, while the appearance of choice served psychological purposes that made subjects more cooperative during processing procedures. Technical, adept Vorth had been selected for specialized servitor conversion that would preserve his engineering expertise while installing control systems that ensured absolute reliability during assignment to classified maintenance operations. His transformation involved more sophisticated modification than standard servitor processing, while preserving cognitive abilities that would remain useful for technical functions that required problem-solving capabilities. The advanced servitor conversion required precise neural surgery that preserved specific brain functions while eliminating personality traits and memories that might compromise security. The procedure involved installation of control implants that provided direct interface with mechanical systems, while ensuring that technical knowledge could be accessed without risk of unauthorized disclosure about its origin or context. Vorth's consciousness survived the modification process in fragmented form that retained professional capabilities, while lacking personal identity or emotional responses that might interfere with assigned functions. His technical expertise remained intact, while his humanity had been eliminated through surgical precision that preserved utility, while eliminating security risks that his knowledge represented. The documentation procedures that accompanied each classification created detailed records that would be stored in archives accessible only to individuals with appropriate clearance levels, while providing institutional memory about witness management that could inform future operations. The records included psychological profiles, medical assessments, and security evaluations that supported decisions about optimal processing methods for different types of subjects. My extended evaluation period included additional psychic probing that examined neural patterns for evidence of corruption or resistance to conditioning procedures, while assessing cognitive capabilities that might prove useful for specialized applications. The thorough analysis suggested that my case involved factors that required careful consideration of multiple variables before reaching final classification decisions. The revelation that witness elimination was systematic rather than exceptional challenged assumptions about Grey Knight's operations, while demonstrating that their role in protecting imperial security involved routine activities that remained hidden from general knowledge. The scope of the infrastructure dedicated to managing witnesses revealed that such situations occurred regularly, while requiring standardized solutions that balanced security requirements against resource utilization. Understanding the true nature of imperial security protocols provided perspective on the cost of protecting human civilization against threats that exceeded conventional military capabilities, while revealing that such protection required sacrifices from individuals who had served faithfully, despite having no choice in their exposure to classified information that made them liability rather than asset. The decision regarding my ultimate fate arrived through channels that operated beyond normal institutional hierarchy, while carrying authority that reflected coordination between Grey Knight's command structure and Inquisition oversight that governed witness management protocols throughout the Imperium. The delay in processing had been caused by complications in my neural patterns that suggested exposure to forces beyond standard demon interaction, while requiring consultation with specialists whose expertise exceeded that of facility personnel. Epistolary Thane from the Grey Knights. Third Brotherhood arrived to conduct specialized examination that involved psychic techniques, developed specifically for detecting corruption that remained hidden from conventional screening procedures. His presence created electromagnetic disturbances that affected monitoring equipment, while his enhanced awareness could perceive threats that existed in dimensions beyond normal spatial reality, making him uniquely qualified to assess risks that my continued existence might represent. The examination revealed traces of warp exposure that had occurred during moments when the breach above Hive Gathis had reached maximum instability, while reality itself became malleable in ways that permitted influence from entities operating beyond normal space-time limitations. The exposure had been brief but intense, while leaving markers in my neural patterns that suggested potential for future manifestation of abilities or vulnerabilities that could compromise Imperial security. This subject has been touched by forces that transcend normal demon interaction, Epistolary Thane announced, while Servo Skulls recorded his assessment for inclusion in documentation that would determine whether standard elimination protocols would be sufficient or whether specialized measures would be required. The corruption is subtle but persistent, while showing characteristics that suggest influence from sources that remain classified beyond current facility clearance levels. The consultation process that followed involved communication with authorities whose identity remained concealed, while their decisions carried weight that reflected access to information about threats and countermeasures that exceeded the knowledge available to personnel conducting routine witness processing. The delay suggested that my case involved factors that required consideration of strategic implications beyond simple security management. Additional prisoners continued arriving at the facility as Grey Knight's operations throughout the sector generated witness populations that required processing through systems designed to manage security risks on industrial scales. The steady flow of new subjects demonstrated that daemon incursions were occurring with frequency that made witness elimination routine administrative function rather than exceptional crisis response. Lance Corporal Vorin from the 27th Mordian Iron Guard had witnessed Grey Knight's operation against demon cult that had infiltrated planetary government on Zirion Prime, while his survival had been accidental result of being trapped beneath rubble during the initial assault. His testimony provided insights into Grey Knight's tactical doctrine, while revealing operational capabilities that remained classified at the highest levels of Imperial military command structure. The processing of Vorin followed standard protocols, while his military record and psychological profile indicated suitability for penitential regiment assignment that would eliminate security risk through deployment in operations where survival was statistically impossible. His acceptance of the assignment demonstrated effective psychological conditioning that made subjects grateful for opportunities to serve the Emperor, despite understanding that such service would result in death. Brother Apothecary Gallus supervised medical procedures that maintained prisoner health at levels adequate for successful completion of processing, while avoiding unnecessary expenditure of resources on individuals whose ultimate fate had been predetermined by security requirements. The medical care provided was sufficient to prevent death from existing injuries, while making no effort to restore subjects to combat effectiveness or normal physical condition. My extended detention period allowed observation of facility operations that revealed the scope and sophistication of infrastructure dedicated to managing witness populations from Grey Knight's activities throughout multiple sectors. The standardized procedures and specialized equipment demonstrated institutional experience with similar situations, while indicating that witness elimination was a fundamental aspect of Grey Knight's operational doctrine rather than unfortunate necessity. The psychological impact of witnessing systematic processing of fellow Imperial servants created understanding that individual survival was meaningless compared to organizational objectives that prioritize security over human life. Regardless of loyalty or service record, the efficiency of the elimination procedures demonstrated that institutional authorities had resolved moral questions about sacrificing loyal citizens in favor of pragmatic solutions that served larger strategic goals. Technical specifications for various processing methods were displayed throughout the facility, while serving both operational requirements and psychological conditioning that made subjects understand the futility of resistance against systems that had been refined through centuries of experience with witness management. The documentation included detailed analysis of effectiveness rates for different elimination methods while comparing resource costs against security benefits. Servitor conversion facilities operated continuously, while processing subjects whose technical skills or physical capabilities made them suitable for specialized functions that required human intuition, combined with absolute reliability. Regarding classified information, the procedures involved sophisticated neural surgery that preserved useful capabilities while eliminating personality traits that might interfere with programmed obedience to assigned duties. The advanced servitor processing that consumed technical adept Vorth had produced a hybrid entity that retained engineering expertise while lacking individual will or capacity for independent thought that might compromise operational security. His transformed consciousness existed as biological processing component in systems that enhanced mechanical efficiency through human cognitive capabilities that artificial intelligence could not replicate. Inquisition indoctrination chambers continued operating while subjects underwent personality reconstruction that replaced individual identity with artificial constructs designed to serve Inquisition objectives without compromising operational security through unauthorized disclosure of classified information. The psychological torture involved in the process was considered acceptable cost for creating assets that could serve specialized functions while maintaining absolute loyalty to imperial authority. The screams that emerged from indoctrination facilities reflected trauma that accompanied forced mental reconstruction, while subjects retained enough awareness to understand the scope of what was being done to them, despite their inability to resist procedures that operated beyond normal concepts of medical ethics or individual rights. The sounds provided acoustic evidence of processes that challenged assumptions about the limits of acceptable sacrifice in service to imperial security. Brother Captain Aurelius conducted periodic inspections that evaluated facility efficiency while ensuring that processing procedures met standards established by Grey Knight's command for managing witness populations that posed security risks to operations whose existence remained classified beyond normal imperial military knowledge. His presence reminded all personnel that their activities served purposes that transcended individual conscience or moral consideration. The arrival of additional Grey Knights personnel suggested escalation in my case that required resources beyond those normally allocated to routine witness elimination, while indicating consultation with authorities whose decision-making processes involved factors that remained concealed from facility staff. The enhanced security measures that accompanied their presence suggested that my ultimate disposition involved considerations that exceeded standard protocol parameters. Justicar Hyperion from the Grey Knights' Sixth Brotherhood carried orders that authorized implementation of specialized elimination procedures designed for subjects whose corruption posed risks that could not be managed through conventional implementation processing methods. His psychic abilities allowed direct examination of neural patterns that had been marked by exposure to forces that operated beyond normal daemon interaction, while requiring countermeasures that exceeded routine purification techniques. The revelation that my case involved exposure to entities that transcended normal classifications within imperial demonology created understanding that my elimination would require methods that ensured complete destruction of consciousness, rather than simple termination of biological functions. The specialized procedures were designed to prevent any possibility that corrupted information could survive through psychic resonance or soul echoes that might preserve dangerous knowledge beyond individual death. This subject has been touched by powers that exist beyond current imperial understanding, Justicar Hyperion announced, while his words carried implications that challenged assumptions about the scope of threats that Grey Knight's operations were designed to counter. Standard termination protocols will prove inadequate while specialized measures are required to ensure complete elimination of contamination that threatens security beyond normal parameters. The preparation procedures that followed involved isolation in chambers that had been sanctified against influences that operated beyond normal space-time limitations, while psychic shielding prevented external interference during psychic examen. Elimination processes that would employ forces capable of affecting consciousness at fundamental levels. The measures demonstrated understanding that conventional death would be insufficient for ensuring that dangerous knowledge could not survive through supernatural means. Additional prisoners began experiencing accelerated processing as facility resources were diverted toward managing my case, while routine elimination procedures were expedited to maintain overall operational efficiency despite complications that required specialized attention from personnel whose expertise exceeded that of standard facility staff. The acceleration demonstrated institutional commitment to maintaining security, despite resource costs that exceeded normal processing budgets. The escape attempt that I initiated during this period reflected desperation, rather than rational assessment of probability for successful flight from facility whose security measures had been designed to contain threats ranging from conventional military assault to psychic manifestation events. The automated systems that detected my movement activated countermeasures that demonstrated the futility of resistance against infrastructure that had been built specifically to prevent such attempts. Brother Sergeant Mordrak's pursuit demonstrated capabilities that exceeded normal Space Marine enhancements, while his tracking abilities incorporated psychic disciplines that could detect target locations through methods that bypassed conventional sensory perception. His approach through facility corridors created electromagnetic disturbances that affected lighting systems, while his presence generated pressure that made movement difficult despite enhanced physical conditioning that had sustained me through military service. The chase through maintenance tunnels revealed the scope of the underground complex while demonstrating that the facility extended far beyond areas that had been visible during normal detention procedures. The hidden sections contained equipment and installations whose purposes remained unclear, while their existence suggested capabilities that exceeded routine witness processing through incorporation of technologies that might serve multiple, classified functions. Emergency systems activated throughout the facility, while automated defense mechanisms engaged to contain security breach that threatened operational integrity, despite the minimal actual threat represented by single prisoner attempting flight from inevitable termination. The response demonstrated institutional paranoia that treated any deviation from approved procedures as potential crisis, requiring immediate intervention through overwhelming force application. Brother Sergeant Mordrak cornered me in a chamber that contained monitoring equipment whose function remained unclear, while displays showed data streams that might have been related to psychic surveillance or reality stability measurement. In areas where warp influence could affect local space-time characteristics, his presence in the chamber created interference patterns that disrupted electronic systems while generating harmonic frequencies that suggested interaction between his enhanced physiology and environmental conditions. "There is nowhere in the galaxy you can flee from knowledge that marks your soul," he stated, while his words carried authority that transcended physical dominance through incorporation of truths about imperial power that operated beyond normal institutional limitations. "Your contamination threatens security that protects billions of lives, while your continued existence serves no purpose that justifies the risks your survival represents." The psychic emanations that preceded my termination created sensory experiences that transcended normal perception while affecting consciousness at levels that bypassed rational thought to directly influence neural patterns that determined individual identity and memory storage. The assault on my awareness felt like dissolution of boundaries that separated self from external reality, while creating existential terror that exceeded physical fear of death through implications that challenged fundamental assumptions about personal continuity. The force weapon that Mordrak wielded channeled energies that operated beyond normal physical laws, while its psychic resonance affected target consciousness through methods that could destroy identity without requiring conventional tissue damage. The blade blazed with light that hurt to perceive directly, while its approach created gravitational effects that distorted local space-time in ways that made normal movement impossible despite conscious effort to evade inevitable contact. The psychic storm that consumed my consciousness during the termination process affected neural structures at fundamental levels while destroying information storage and processing capabilities that defined individual identity and personal history. The experience felt like watching memories being burned away while personality traits dissolved under assault from forces that could manipulate the building blocks of thought itself. Understanding that preservation of dangerous knowledge required complete elimination of consciousness rather than simple biological termination provided final insight into the scope of threats that Imperial security protocols were designed to counter. The specialized elimination procedures demonstrated institutional understanding that some forms of corruption could survive individual death through supernatural means while requiring countermeasures that operated beyond normal concepts of usurpation, mortality. The dissolution of my identity occurred gradually as psychic forces systematically dismantled neural patterns that contained memories of demon exposure and Grey Knight's operations, while ensuring that no trace of classified information could survive through soul echoes or psychic resonance that might preserve dangerous knowledge beyond individual consciousness. The process felt like watching components of selfhood being carefully removed while awareness remained intact long enough to witness its own destruction. The final moments of consciousness revealed that my elimination was motivated by necessity rather than cruelty, while serving purposes that transcended individual survival through protection of Imperial security against threats that exceeded normal military capabilities. The understanding provided acceptance that made termination process bearable despite its fundamental horror through recognition that individual sacrifice served larger goals that justified extreme measures. The psychic erasure that concluded the elimination process removed all traces of consciousness while ensuring that classified knowledge could not survive through supernatural means that might preserve information beyond individual death. The procedure represented perfection of techniques developed through centuries of experience, with managing security risks that required complete elimination rather than conventional termination through biological means. The consciousness that observed its own destruction represented final paradox of elimination procedure that required awareness to persist long enough to witness complete erasure while ensuring that no fragment of dangerous knowledge could survive the termination process. The experience provided understanding that individual identity was temporary construct that could be systematically dismantled through application of forces that operated beyond normal physical limitations. The silence that followed represented successful completion of elimination procedure, while demonstrating effectiveness of techniques designed to remove security risks through complete destruction of consciousness rather than simple biological termination. The absence that replaced individual awareness served as evidence that classified knowledge had been eliminated along with the person who possessed it. The Grey Knights had fulfilled their obligation to Imperial security through elimination of witness, whose continued existence posed unacceptable risk to operations whose secrecy was essential for protecting human civilization against threats that exceeded conventional understanding. The systematic nature of witness elimination demonstrated institutional commitment to maintaining security, despite moral costs that challenged assumptions about acceptable sacrifice in service to larger strategic objectives. The truth about Grey Knight's operations remained concealed through procedures that ensured complete elimination of evidence regarding their activities while preserving operational effectiveness through methods that prioritized security over individual survival or conventional concepts of justice. Their role in protecting Imperial civilization required capabilities that operated beyond normal military doctrine while accepting costs that included systematic elimination of loyal citizens whose knowledge posed unacceptable security risks. The final erasure represented culmination of witness management protocols that had been refined through millennia of experience with security threats that required extreme measures to prevent unauthorized disclosure of information that could compromise Imperial military capabilities. The elimination procedures demonstrated that institutional survival took precedence over individual rights while serving purposes that transcended moral considerations through necessity that justified any sacrifice required to maintain security.